In the last video, we got started with the browser router, and you learned that how you can create different routes. But what is missing in these pages is some sort of common elements like header, footer, maybe the menu also, because menu will be displayed in all the different pages. Now I can certainly go back to my app component and my add movie component and create a separate component called header and start adding that component into the add movie and the app component. And that would work, but maybe it's a good idea to create some sort of a master layout or a base template that will designate some areas of the screen as a header and the footer and the menu, and all we're doing is simply injecting our components like app component, like add movie component, and so on. So to achieve that, I'm going to go into components and create a new file, and I will call it BaseLayout. You can call it anything you want. This is just a normal component. I'm going to copy the code from add movie and just call it BaseLayout. And I will pass in the props. And when it is displaying, I'm just going to say BaseLayout. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say header and wrap this inside a div. So this base layout template is kind of like the master template for everything. This means that this is going to dictate the base layout of the page. Let's go ahead and format the document. Okay, so you can see right now we have a header component, and we can also have a content and a footer component also. I guess you can call this a header component, header element for HTML. Now let's see that how we want to display this base layout. The header would remain the same for every single page. We will simply display the header or the menu. The footer will remain the same. We will display copyright information. The content will be different, right? When we go to slash or the root, we will display content of app component. But if we go to add movie, then we will display the add movie component. So how can I make those switches? How can I change or inject the content right over here based on the actual URL? First, let's go to the index.js. And what we're trying to do is we will wrap our routes, all of these, into something called a base layout, the one that we just created. There we go. We have a base layout. Now, if we simply just save the page, let it compile, and go back and check out the result, you can see that we are able to see the base layout, which contains the header, the content, and the footer, which is the base layout, the one that we just created. Not sure why it's not actually formatting it correctly, but okay, a little bit better maybe, but not much. So you can see the base layout is getting rendered, and it is displaying the header and the footer and just the word content. So header and footer are fine. These are common for all the pages. The content is where we want to inject our content. So right now, as you can see, I am at the root URL. So which component do you think should be displayed? The app component. But for now, it is not displaying anything. So how can we achieve that? If we go to the index.js, you can see that we have the routes and everything is perfectly fine. Now, this area between the starting tag of any component, the starting tag is right here, and the ending tag of that component, so this area right here, anything which goes over here, we have two lines, two different routes. This area in React is called children. All right. And If I ask you the same question, what is this area called in pure HTML, inner HTML? So what we want to do is we want to render this area, this part, instead of the content. So if I go to my base layout, and instead of the content, I simply say props dot children. Let's go back, and now you can see that it says app component. If I go to add movie, now it says add movie component. Now one of the things that you should also do is create a switch. Switch basically means that we are going to select or switch between one of these components. Now I know that we are switching between the components based on the route, but adding a switch also makes sure that it is switching between these two components, and I believe it also kind of keeps track of the history of what you're doing. Okay, so we have added the switch component. So this means that either we are going to be displaying this one or we are going to be displaying this one. So now let's go back, and it's going to produce the same exact result. If I go to the root URL, I will see the app component. If I go to the add movie URL, it shows me the add movie component. This is great. How can we make it more better by introducing a menu control? Because nobody is going to go over here on the top and start writing the URLs. That's not what the user is going to do. User wants to see some sort of a menu, probably displayed right here, and with different options. And they click on some option and then they're taken to that particular page. So how can we accomplish that? Let's go ahead and learn that in the next video.